Hi, everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Glad to be talking on this episode with comics creator Tom Feister. Tom, welcome. Welcome to the show, and thanks for saying yes.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm flattered to be asked.
Yeah. I see a shiny globe over your shoulder with an
Yeah,
Eisner E on it. So please tell us about that to lead off a bit of the conversation.
that is an Eisner for Best New Series for Ex Machina. It's an old one now
I
from
love it. I love it.
2005. Um, my son actually he's 19 and just found out last week that I won an Eisner, even though it's been sitting in my office for most of his life.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. I was, of course, looking up some of your work for our talk, and you mentioned 2005, and it does not feel, I'm sure to you it doesn't feel like this either, but it doesn't feel like that long ago that Ex Machina was being made, and love that story and that kind of high concept storytelling.
it feels like a week ago and also 1,000 years.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So many things do in the 2020s, it seems. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'll also mention you've taken the role of penciler, inker, cover artist, which is no joke being on the cover of a book. They don't just put anybody on the cover of a book. Um, and so you've done those things with Ex Machina, with Legion, and then one of my favorites is kind of the corner pocket of the DC Legion universe, which is the Justice League Adventures. You did
Oh yeah.
some work for that once upon a time, I believe.
Yeah, that was a one-off. It was a weird one.
Yeah. A little bit of a different style there with the Bruce Timm animated sort of take.
Well, that's you mentioned, doing a lot of different things. That's kind of a holdover of when I first started working professionally as an artist full time. I was starting in animation.
Hmm.
And at the
Hmm.
time, my day job was working as a an optician at Lens Crafters. And I met somebody who was a local animation studio, and they had a project where they basically needed anyone who could hold a pencil or a brush to ink. I believe it was a Scooby Doo interstitial for Cartoon Network.
Nice.
And so, I took in my portfolio and went in and inked Scooby Doo for a couple days. And the what I learned while I was there was that the more things you knew how to do, the longer you got to stay there working on other freelance projects. And so, if the choice was learning how to do something new or going back to work at Lens Crafters, I was hungry to learn whatever they were going to teach. And
Mm.
so I learned how to ink. I learned how to tween, which an animation term, and I learned how to shoot pencil tests. Just anything I could as an excuse to stay around. And I basically have worked full time as an artist since. And I
Nice.
applied that same kind of idea of learning every step in the process to comics. So that way, when work in one area dried up, I could pick up work as, an inker or a colorist, or I've done lettering. The only thing I haven't done in comics, I haven't done any writing and I haven't done any editing, but I've done
Hmm.
pretty much everything else.
Yeah, as I was saying your roles, I was thinking, I think he's done these other things too. So you're a very versatile person, and even the difference between something like, as I mentioned, the Justice League Adventures, which is smooth, fluid, and animated style, and Ex Machina, which is very like much more line work. It feels like, and extremely detailed, and lots of textures. You have a really nice range in that way that I enjoy a lot.
Well, again, it was all about, staying employed and keeping money coming in, and just as an artist, you want to be able to do a lot of things just to grow your skill set. And I also like the idea of, if I know what the guy who is inking has to do, then it's going to make me a better penciler. And if I know what the guy who is coloring something has to go through, then it's going to make me a better inker, and on down the line. And again, that was something I picked up from animation is, if I knew what problems were faced by, the guy doing the cleanup pencils, then I worked a little harder when I was doing my tweens to make things perfectly clear for what needed to be done for the next guy down the line.
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm gathering, were you a comics reader as a young person? Is that part of what drew you into the medium? Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I was always crazy about superheroes and comics, and from an early age, my earliest memories are Spider-Man and Batman, and playing with those Mego figures when I was a kid, and the whatever comic books my mom would hand me to keep me quiet on a car drive somewhere. I was just hooked.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I know a lot of the interactions and collaborations are sometimes kind of through the mail, through email, through different means. Along the way in the industry, were there people that you connected with that were especially positive, supportive, like those warm experiences of collaboration?
Um, yeah, I was again, I was working in animation, and I was connected with a couple guys down in Macon, Georgia, at a studio called Jolly Roger Studio.
Hmm.
And around the time that animation work was kind of drying up, they had an opening at Jolly Roger, which was a comic studio with Tony Harris of Starman, Ray Snyder, Dan Jolly, Drew Johnson. Uh, I think that was it for the crew that was there when I was invited to join. And it was about an hour and a half drive from Atlanta, but I would commute down there and often just crash on the couch, or somebody would give me a couch in their apartment to crash in for a night or two. And that's really where I started working in comics, and working just around other people in the industry.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
and I'll say, even before that, when I was a kid, my mom got a tour of Marvel Comics. I was around 11 at the time.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And we took a bus up to New York City. And as soon as we got there, they told us all the artists and writers work from home, so we're not going to meet anyone. So I was immediately disappointed,
Mm.
because it was basically an office space. But then at the end of the tour, my mom mentioned to the receptionist who had taken us around that I was a big fan of G.I. Joe.
Mhm.
And G.I. Joe was the comic that really set the hook for me as a collector. And so she said, "Oh, well, Larry Hama is in his office. Let me see if he has a minute to talk to you." So they walked me back to Larry's office, and it was this tiny little room, and he actually shared it with another person. And I just remember it being just packed with papers. Like, any place that you could jam papers was just packed with stuff. And so they took me back to meet Larry, and he couldn't have been nicer. And
Nice. Nice.
he started handing me, just pulling comic books from nooks and crannies around his office, and gave me a copy of GI Joe #1 and signed it for me. And just I walked out of there with a small stack of comics. And at the time, the big storyline was who killed the Hardmaster. And he told me who the killer was, and swore me to secrecy. And I never told anyone. But that experience um, changed my life. Larry
Mm.
took 5 minutes of his day and spun my head around, and that was all I wanted to do after that. And that, and then I had an excellent teacher when I was in junior high, who it was the only year that this man taught at our school. He was an art teacher, but he was also a professional artist. And he was very different for our school. He was the first African American teacher that my school had. But the thing I remember most of all is he would play records in the back of in his room.
Hmm.
And so you would walk down the hall and you would hear, Coltrane and John Lee Hooker and Hendrix. First time I ever heard Hendrix. And I was big into R&B and blues, which was weird for a kid from the suburbs.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I just loved this music, and so we kind of bonded over that. And he saw that I had an affinity for drawing, And he gave me the best advice I ever got, which was take a sketchbook with you everywhere you go.
Nice.
And that was, it was at a time in my life where, you're kind of looking for your place in junior high. Like, you're not a jock, you're not a brain, where do you fit in?
Hmm.
And he kind of clued me in. Oh, I'm an artist. That's what I am. That's what I do. And so, after that, that really gave me some direction, because my drawing before that point was kind of aimless. Like, I was I was drawing, but I didn't really know what to do, or how to go about improving.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, that was when I started to take it seriously, and really think about it as, oh yeah, I could actually do this.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I love the story of well, two prong here. First, meeting your heroes, and they're actually heroes and very kind people with Larry Hama, and then of course being a teacher. Love the story of a teacher that makes a positive impact in that way too.
Oh
You
yeah, he
mentioned.
was great. Sorry.
Oh, no, no, after you.
No, I'm done.
Okay. You mentioned before I hit record that you've also been involved in sharing comics literacy with young people as well. Would you care to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It was, I don't want to make it sound like more than it was. It was a very loose, we called it Comics Club, and it was done at my daughter's school, and we did it during the school day. We ran it out of the library, and we had, on the average, about 40 kids a week who would show up, and it was part of the STEM program.
Uh-huh.
And so, what I would do is I would bring in piles of comic books, and I would talk very loosely about storytelling and thinking about cause and effect with regards to storytelling. You would need to set something up in this panel so that when you need that later on in the story, you've already established it.
Hmm.
um, and thinking about design in terms of, making sure that things kind of flowed from one panel to the next, and from one page to the next. But I stayed away from conversations about style, because they're fourth graders,
Uh-huh.
and the main thing you want is, you want them to enjoy drawing, and you don't want them to be discouraged by anything. It is a wide open field. And that was another thing that I did, was, I brought in comics that were everything from Bruce Timm Batman animated, to Tiny Toons,
Hmm.
to you know mainstream Batman and Superman and stuff like that. And then, other things that they might not normally see, like Mouse.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that way they saw that there is no right way or wrong way to draw or to tell a story. As
Hmm.
long as your reader is able to understand the story you're telling, the idea that you're trying to get across, it's all fair game.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
but I'll say that initially the teachers were not excited about the prospect of Comics Club. But what they saw over time was that kids were excited to come to Comics Club, and it was something they could use as a carrot.
Hmm.
Uh, so that way, they, if they got their work done, or they behaved that day, or if they didn't behave that day, they didn't get to come to Comics Club. And so my daughter, or my child now, is going into eighth grade, and when I see those kids today, they still ask me about it.
Oh,
Unfortunately,
nice.
we did this the year before COVID,
Yeah.
and after COVID, it just never came together again. Which, it's a bummer, because I think back to my experience with my art teacher and how he changed my life, and having access to people who were professional artists over the course of my life impacted me. I'll
Hmm.
tell you another quick story. My father, there's a writer named Dean Koontz. He writes horror, kind of like
Yeah.
Stephen King. I mean, he's one of those guys who's known. Um, his wife was my dad's secretary.
Oh, cool.
And so when I was a kid, we went out to California to visit. And so my dad was always he's an IBMer, business suit, very kind of stiff worldview, not into the arts kind of a guy. Not a
Hmm.
bad guy, just the arts just aren't part of his world. So anyway, we went out to see Dean and his wife Gerda, and so we walk into this house, and it's this huge, beautiful house, and he shows us pencil drawings for the new cover to his next book, which was called Twilight Eyes. And it was just these amazing drawings. And he said that the artist was a teacher, and this drawing is something he does in his spare time. And so what I observed as a kid, I was, 9, 10, 11, maybe somewhere in that area.
Hmm.
Uh, my dad was responding to this guy, Dean, is a creative, and he's got this beautiful house, and he's obviously doing well. And here he is, showing off this artwork. And as a kid, that registered for me that, oh, I can do this. You can make a living with your imagination.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that, again, that contact, having that proximity to someone who is a working creative, in this case, a writer, it had an impact on me that this is something that's possible. This isn't something that people only do in this part of the country or that part of the country. This was a guy from Harrisburg who
Hmm.
made it big. Um, and so, that was one of the bummers of the Comics Club not being around anymore, was that I was excited about the prospect of bringing in my friends, artists and writers, who were all excited to call into this class and talk to these kids about, hey, I'm a writer on this TV show, or hey, I'm a cover artist for Spider-Man, or whatever it might be. And so there were so many of us, artists that were excited about spreading the gospel of, you can do this. It's
Hmm.
going to take
Hmm.
hard work, but this is something that you can do, and if you have a talent and an interest and you work hard, it's possible.
Nice, nice. I
So
love that.
yeah.
And I love that connection with authors, creators, because it can seem like such an ethereal, like who actually does these things kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
You bump into it all the time, just with meeting other parents of my kids at school and stuff, and their dads are doctors and lawyers, but doing the kind of stuff I do, it's just not something that people run into quite as often.
Yeah. Yeah. So I always like to ask about like current creative directions as well, and anything future that you'd like to dabble in that you want to talk about.
I spent most of the last decade working in animation and character design.
Hmm.
I haven't
Hmm.
done quite as much comics as I used to. And the itch to work in comics is still there. It's just a matter of, and I hate to get into this kind of stuff, but it's just a lot more lucrative to do animation than it
Yeah.
is comics. And
Yeah.
the quality of life for, comics is a grind.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
it's it's a grind, and especially when you have a family and you have bills to pay and all that kind of stuff. Um, the prospect of spending 10 or 12 hours on a page to make this much money versus working on something for, an animation project where, your hourly rate is not too far off from what comics will pay you for an entire day's work.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I wish I was exaggerating, but that's the reality. Comics page rates in comics have really not changed since when I started almost 20 years ago.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that speaks to just changes in the industry that need to happen. But then also, I have so many students who enjoy the arts, enjoy creating, and you ask them, well, what do you want to do? I want to be an animator, or I want to work in video games, or whatever that happens to be. So also really powerful that you are a person who does those things.
Again, it's part of when comics work was drying up, being able to do other things, saved me, saved
Hmm.
my career. And it, for me, drawing is drawing. And whether you're telling a story in a single image or in a full page, a lot of the problem solving is the same.
Hmm.
Um, but you know, again, I'll say, one of the things that I end up talking to younger artists about is and I was guilty of it too. You tend to get blinders on, like, I want to do comics, 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 and you miss opportunities for other things and other things that you might enjoy.
Hmm.
Uh, and so again, I think being able to do a lot of things, or at least being being able to, for lack of a better term, speak the lingo,
Hmm.
to take on assignments that might challenge you. I think it's an important thing to do, to build a career and feed yourself. But a lot of the things that I learned in animation, I've been able to apply to comics and vice versa.
Love that. Love that. And again, just speaking to that flexibility that you have, love that. Um, Anywhere that listeners can go to check out your animation work, check out your comics work, points of contact, anything like that that you would point people to is kind of an almost final question, unless there's anything else that you want to share.
I would say, I've been thankfully very busy the last couple of years. So I've been not great at updating my website. And just the nature of the kind of work I do, I have to sign a lot of non-disclosure agreements.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
there are things that I've worked on that I can't show off. And so the project that I'm on now, I'm not allowed to talk about, but I've been drawing like a beast for months, and I can't show any of it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so my Instagram is probably the thing that's most up to date.
Hmm.
Uh, the fine folks at Adult Swim have been keeping me very busy the last few years, doing a lot of stuff for Rick and Morty.
Hmm.
And more recently, I've been working on things for a newer show called Teenage Euthanasia. And so I've been able to post those things as they've been released. But again, there's also uh, wide swaths of work that I'm unable to post or talk about.
Under wraps until a
I wish I
future
had something
date.
more exciting to say.
That's actually exciting. It's that mystery box. It's like, what could it be that's inside that
Yeah,
box? So that works well. So I'll make sure that when we're talking about this, the Instagram floats up for those that are watching the video, or it's linked in the description for the podcast so that people can go and check it out.
that would be great. I'd appreciate that. And
Absolutely.
if you have any other questions, if there's anything that I can clarify, or anything like that, I'm happy to do it.
All right.
And
All right.
thank you for doing something like this. It's great that there are teachers out there that are um, you know bridging this gap. I know that in schools there's not a huge amount of arts education
Mhm.
as when I was growing up, and that was part of why we started, the comics club, is that there just wasn't an opportunity for kids to do that stuff. And there's so much interest in kids with comics, and
Yeah.
it just broke my heart that this information is out there, and there are dads and moms working in comics who we want to share this information with kids, because we want that next generation to be excited and prepared too,
Yeah.
to know what they're getting into, so that it's not just a mystery to parents and also to kids.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of, I'm thinking of starting a comics club this year, so may the
Oh, please do.
conversation continue. Yeah, yeah. That's as long as my administration says yes, that's the plan. So I appreciate the kind words, and glad to do this, and glad to talk with people that have that passion.
anything I can do to help, I'm happy to send across. I had stuff like handouts that had covered like basic, not anatomy, but like the human head is this compared to the chest, and the arm, and just breakdowns of how to draw the figure, and then some basic storytelling stuff, and even just some handouts for page layouts and possible storytelling ideas for kids.
That's
So
wonderful.
anything that I can throw your way, or any teachers in general, like I wish there was a resource that teachers could go to and just download this stuff and
Mhm.
hand it out to interested kids.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I will take you up on that.
Great, great.